leadership of the Analytics and Insights Forum. So Randy, we've got 5 or 6 minutes before we're ready to go. It's my understanding that Ed and Laila are here. So I am going to turn the program over to you. You can introduce them, slide deck, and let's see what they got to say. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul. I'll put this up real quick. So I'm really excited to start this conversation today with Ed Kelly and Laila Alequresh to really talk about data sharing and data management. And the way this is going to be structured today is both of them are going to do a short introduction, talk about their role and how both the city of Dallas and the state of Texas are managing data. And then we're going to move into a Q&A section where I have a handful of questions that I want to go through, but we also want to open it up if you have questions as well. And so if you have questions, I want you to either, you can put them into the chat window and we can moderate them from there, or Paul, I know, is watching that. If somebody wants to raise their hand and ask a question, we can handle it that way as well. So I'm going to start, I only have a handful of slides, and then we will turn the slides off when we jump into the Q&A section. But just to give you sort of introduction so you know who I am, since I'm going to be moderating this. My name is Randy Crum. I'm an infographic and data visualization designer. I founded and run a company called InfoNewt that's based here in the DFW area. And we design data visualizations and visual communication for companies all over the place. And so that's just what we do, is we help people communicate with their data. I'm also author of the book, Cool Infographics. That's been out for about 7 years now. I teach the course that Caroline was talking about. I developed that online certificate program and I teach it. We run it about twice a year. That's data visualization and communication. So it's not only how to visualize your data, but also how to deliver a presentation in front of executives or customers or investors and use data in that presentation and make it effective. I'm also the organizer of the DFW Data Visualization Meetup Group. We have a meetup group with over 4,000 members in the DFW area, and we try to have local community events throughout the year. And here with the Tech Titans group, I'm on the advisory committee for the Analytics and Insights Forum, one of the 8 different special interest forums that Tech Titans has. So that's generally just a quick intro for me. Let me bring on Ed. So Ed, are you there?
I am, Randy. How are you today?
Excellent. Welcome, Ed. So Ed is the Chief Data Officer for the state of Texas, based down in Austin. And you have just a little bit. And so I'm going to give you the stage for, say, 5 or 10 minutes and give us a little insight into your world.
Great. Thank you. And just to kind of start off, just to what Randy had said, we have had him come and speak at our sessions down in Austin. And they're very well received. So I really can make a shout out for Randy and the work that he does. So that's great. Good morning, everyone. Ed Kelly, Chief Data Officer for the state of Texas. I wanted to give you just a little bit of background on me. I've had 16 years of public sector experience and held a variety of different roles. In this current position as Chief Data Officer, I've actually held it for 2 years. The statewide data coordinator position is the one that I basically joined up with our agency, the Department of Information Resources, 6 years ago. And however, that position, the statewide data coordinator role, was actually had a sunset on it. It was to end this particular year here. And the legislature were kind enough to grant me the opportunity to stay on and work as a formalized Chief Data Officer for the state. Other positions within IT and managing large operations have helped. I think anytime you work in the public sector, your experience and your network and your relationships help you to become successful. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we get into some of the questions a bit. 23 years of private sector, banking, financial services, and computers. I was very happy to be associated with some great people. Peter Aiken, if you don't know him, he's been in the industry of data management for probably 25, 30 years, as well as several other CDOs to co-author the CDO journey, insights and advice from data leaders. And this was really a book to provide information to individuals who were just starting out, just starting to take on this new role of CDO and what it meant, and some of the challenges and opportunities that we wanted to share with the reader on that. So very happy with that. I'm actually moved from Boston to Austin 26 years ago. Just a little story goes, I was met on the street up in Boston on a cold February day in 1994. And this gentleman said, there's a company in Round Rock, Texas called Dell Computer, who you might be interested in working for. Didn't know Dell Computer, didn't know Round Rock, Texas, but anyways, took the interviews, came down here, and never looked back. Been married for 35 years. I do have to say, to the same woman. She's put up with me, and I have 3 great boys who are very well professionals in various disciplines, one of them in data. So he's by far the good son to be a part of that. But that's a little bit of background on me. Talking a little bit about the role real quick. The Chief Data Officer position at Texas is really a kind of a chameleon type role. We work in a lot of different areas. We establish practices, best practices and standards and policies around how to implement a data management program. We have worked with the legal community to basically develop a data sharing agreement that is leveraged between agencies to help expedite the process of data sharing. We work with the community of vendor partners around data analytics in teaching the best practices associated with managing your information, getting it to a ready state to be able to do some of the deeper analytics associated with what's needed. And then our open data portal is the product that we offer in making it available to our DIR customers and allowing them to publish open data assets and share that with their constituents. So we have people, sort of researchers, other vendor partners, other countries looking at our data. And it's a real good product from a way to help expedite I'll call it the public information request process. There was another law that passed and allows us to direct constituents to the open data portal so they can self-serve. That's eliminating the need for an agency to fulfill its public information request if the individual chooses. So we've got a lot of traction with that over the years, and it continues to grow. And lastly is the data literacy. We focus on providing base level education for our customers, for our agencies and our higher education partners, so that they can take this education and then apply it as they build their own data programs within their agency. So I'll stop there, but that's just kind of a high level overview and pass it back to Randy.
All right, thank you, Ed. All right, so let me also bring on, let me move forward to Laila Alequresh, the inaugural Chief Innovation Officer for the City of Dallas. Laila, you there?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Yes, we can.
Great. I'm going to apologize. I'm having some technical video issues. I just switched from another video platform, which is always fun because my settings like to reset themselves. So appreciate
your audio's great.
Thank you, Randy. And I want to thank Paul and Tech Titans for the invitation. Today, I'm happy to be with you virtually, hoping next time we have this event, we'll be able to visit in person, but grateful that you were able to pull together such an incredible virtual event, given the times that we're in. So thanks again, Randy. As you can see on the slide, I've worked in the city, at least in the civic sector, for about 10 years now, but I've been working in the private nonprofit sector beforehand for about 20 years altogether, and have expertise in the areas of data analytics, performance, strategy planning, and innovation. Those have all been kind of the scope of my responsibilities in each of those sectors. So I have a good understanding and perspective of what these functions look like in other sectors, how they've been prioritized or deprioritized, how the models for data management look like in different areas that I've been able to leverage and bring here in my civic career. And I think the wonderful thing that we've been able to do in Dallas since I've been here is to really set the foundational work to establish the city's first formal data office. I think that's pretty unique to Texas cities. a lot of the large cities across the countries do have dedicated data practices, and happy to be a part of the journey to bring that function here formally to the city of Dallas as well. My fun fact, I haven't been married for 35 years, which is certainly very admirable on Addison, but we do have wanderlust and we have traveled to about 50 countries. And I always say that working in government has kind of screwed me over on vacations because I notice weird things when I travel. I'm always looking at sidewalks and traffic signals and city halls and websites. So it's kind of an interesting lens when I go to other cities to what do I notice about the infrastructure, the data, or even just the website itself. So that's a little bit about me. If we switch over to the next slide, this is a really simplistic overview, and let me just start off by saying that, the city challenges that relate to data management and sharing are not unique to Dallas or Texas. I found this in all of my civic experiences, and they've basically encountered the same challenges. So even when I began my role here in Dallas, I knew that there was likely going to be some opportunity related to data and improving the data landscape, but initially I wasn't really sure where data sat on its data journey. And so, at its core, all of the elements that Ed referenced in terms of data management practices, data sharing, analytics, transparency, literacy, those are all elements that, we looked at as well at the local level to see what we could do to enhance those particular functions within the city, which were very scattered. So what I will say, and what led to the functions that you see on the slide here in the 3 buckets, is quite a journey over my first year in the city. And when I first arrived, like I said, I wasn't really sure where Dallas was on its journey, but throughout a listening tour, which is quite extensive, in meeting with elected officials, with department directors, with key external stakeholders, somehow organically this word data just kept coming up over and over again. And I realized that I needed to pivot a bit and spend some time focusing and incubating a formal data practice on the city's behalf. And for me, and perhaps Ed can relate to this as well, there's always this constraint in city government around having what we consider to be the right amount of resources, whether that's funding, personnel, et cetera. And we, really struggled. We really didn't have even a profile for a formal data employee within city government. And so I'm very proud that we established the first data scientist position and hired in the city of Dallas. And we were able to use that employee as well as some community and outward facing initiatives and partnerships to incubate this case for data in city government. And so 2 of the things that might be of interest to this audience are, 1, we initiated a university partnerships consortium called the Data Collaborative. So in partnership with local universities as well as national universities, we were able to tap into really key data analytics talent at the graduate level and have them work hand in hand with us on, really complex analytical projects that we didn't have the capacity or the bandwidth with internally, but were projects that had been kind of sitting on the shelf, even though they were urgent, and being able to knock out about half a dozen to a dozen of those through those university partnerships was pretty powerful. The second one is an initiative that is pre-pandemic, but we created called Civic Good. Civic Good allows community members like yourselves, if you have a specialty in some component of data, whether it's data analytics, perhaps you work as a data scientist in your organization, you're part of a data group, it allows you to fill out an interest form, become part of a list, and as projects come up that really require expanded capacity, to come and sit at the table with us in City Hall and to analyze the data with us. We know there's lots of organizations in the for-profit sector that have access to the latest tools and resources and skills that we may not be exposed to or be aware of, certainly new programming languages that are always coming up as well. And so we want to make sure that we expose our employees, which typically career servants and public servants, to the latest tools out there. So we are really capturing and analyzing the data that we do collect in the most efficient way possible. So that's definitely 2 initiatives I wanted to mention that were outward facing. And then the third one was around transparency and dashboards. And so thinking about open data portals, thinking about the way that cities and states and even the federal government share data, sometimes we don't present that in a way that is the most useful or the more digestible for people. Like, I have a finance undergraduate degree, and so I can dig into numbers all day and model things, but I know other people are very visual. And so being able to present data in a way that is understandable and digestible to the public is really helpful. I think open data portals are really powerful in its ability to post a data set, being able to download it and have people who are out in the public build apps, from developers or just as a normal citizen being able to see what's going on in their community. And so all of those things that we incubated actually led to a presentation in which this slide was presented. And so we looked at the things that were successful across the Data Collaborative, the Civic Good Initiative, the dashboards that we've really built out, and said, what should an office look like? And because I knew the innovation practice in Dallas would not be sufficient to be able to fulfill the growing list of things that we needed to do, we really needed to build a case for a dedicated office. So in the last budget, there was a formal data office approved. It is called the Office of Data Analytics and Business Intelligence. It is presented with 3 different buckets. And so data integrity is one of them. So if you think about the data you collect, and I do call cities data factories, I don't know if Ed can relate to that one, but essentially we're collecting all these data nuggets every single day about hundreds of programs. And so the power is not in the data collection process necessarily, but it is in why we collect the data we collect and how we use that data. So the data could just be sitting there, but it could be useful in trying to consider the analysis of that data point in improving programs, in maintaining programs, and even overlaying that data program with other programs in the city that can make it more powerful for the user experience or for the resident. So the integrity of the data is really powerful. The second one is the analytics. So obviously taking the data and doing something with it, recognizing trends and patterns. These are things that obviously with the pandemic, we're looking at really closely in terms of where the impact is for people experiencing COVID, where the testing is available, where the vaccinations are available. And so we can only do that by combining data sets from different areas and seeing what the impact is on our residents. And then finally, spatial analysis, that's your typical ArcGIS function. A lot of the way city look at data is from an equity and accessibility lens. And so we want to make sure that the services we provide are equally accessible and equitable across the city. We can only do that by doing geographic-based analyses. And so these are the 3 functions that we presented as core to the functions of what we needed and what we found during our data journey in our first year to build out the need for data. So I just said a lot about the case for data and how we've been set up, and I'll pause here because I'm sure that is probably going to lead to a lot of questions for Ed and myself, but thanks, Randy.
It is. Thank you, Laila. And I'm going to follow up real quick, Laila. How new is this focus on creating, I guess, a data team and the focus on your role and needing to build this data capacity within the city of Dallas? Is it, you said in the last budget, so is it only about a year old?
Yeah, so I came in about a little more than 2 years ago, and like I said, had not originally intended for data to be such a large part of innovation. I feel like innovation is one of those buzzwords that is going around government right now. And so the way I define innovation is not necessarily innovation equals data, but what the data can tell us and how innovation can be used to design interventions or improvements to city programs is where the connection lies. And so the data office itself, this presentation was given to City Council during, I'd say probably last summer, and then the budget was approved last fall. So we're just literally in the infancy of even setting up the data office itself, and it involved reallocation of city resources. So of course, we're in the middle of a fiscal crisis, so we were able to reallocate some existing resources into building out, the core of the data function. So really, I would say just a few months old, not very old at all.
And even as new as it is, which is surprising, do you think Dallas is, I guess because of the size of Dallas, are you ahead of a lot of other cities? Is that something that a lot of cities are just now getting to come to grips with?
So I'm going to lean into my civic career experience here in the other cities. So by comparison, my previous role with Los Angeles, they have had a formal data office for many years under the current administration. So I'd say, 5+ maybe 10 years now. And the same for Philadelphia, although it's morphed into different phases, they've also had a dedicated area for data for a long time. So I think it just depends on, the administration and who is setting the strategic direction and the vision for the city in terms of the priorities, because we always are limited in our resources and there's so many needs across the city, especially public facing ones. So when you think about, hi, I need more firefighters, I need more police officers, we need to pave more streets, it becomes really difficult then to advocate for things like we need to upgrade our systems, because people don't understand the connection between efficiency in our systems and how services get actually executed and delivered to residents. So I would say that we're a little bit earlier in the journey than other cities, but that actually offers us the opportunity to learn from others and be able to skip a couple of learning steps there and maybe move a little bit faster because we have those case studies in front of us from other places.
So I'll move that to you, Ed. How far along do you see the state of Texas is in building their data capabilities and the data team there?
Yeah, so thanks, Randy. And just a couple of comments on Laila's opening remarks. I think the other city in Texas that we work very closely with is the city of Austin. And they have a similar type of organizational structure and focus on data within that city as well. So I think, maybe there's an opportunity for some sharing and some collaboration on that, because they are a little bit further along in their maturity of the program for Austin as well. In Texas, so, one of the things that we heavily rely upon is the legislature. The legislature helps us continue to build the foundation necessary to develop the overall program. I am and have been for most of my role here a team of one. So I don't have deep amounts of resources, right? This past year, our agency hired a data officer. So he's just come on board since October, and I'm kind of bringing him up to speed on some of the things that we need overall within our agency, within DIR, the Department of Information Resources. So other agencies now are hiring similar type of roles, enterprise data officer, chief data officer, and such. Without that kind of center point person to kind of drive it, it has been kind of a hit or miss. Open data has accelerated further along the maturity level than all the other things. But in this upcoming session, we have a bill that's been introduced already. It's Senate Bill 475 from Senator Nelson that lays out in Section 3 of the bill the requirement for agencies to hire or establish a focal point, an agency data management officer. And again, I think having that representative, having that individual at the agency's strategic level will help take some of the things we have built. So we built a lot of resources, a lot of tools. We have some great network and infrastructure set up, but we've been giving it to, I guess, to the wrong level. And with this designation, hopefully, as agencies start to see the value of having this position, then they can take some of the things we have used and built and work with the development of their program. I, for one, everything is done through collaboration and partnership. I don't have an edict that says Ed's the one that says it should be this. And I don't work that way either. I always try to work with the team to be able to kind of move the maturity of any agency's development in any of those 5 blocks we talked about, whether it be sharing of data, analytics, or open data, or illiteracy. So I would say that some agencies are further along in their development and others are just starting out with their journey. So we have a little bit more work to do, but I think there's a nucleus around it. And COVID-19 brought out the need and the immediacy to basically continue to focus on data for the response and the recovery effort and the vaccine now. That's all leveraging data and helping to be able to identify what are the proper decisions that need to be made to go forward with things.
And I'd love to tap into that because obviously the pandemic and COVID is top of mind for a lot of people and is very data related as we all see people sharing dashboards and all kinds of charts and data related to the pandemic. And I'll start with you, Ed, each of you. What did you see as your biggest challenge in your role? And I guess the question is, did it change because of the pandemic? So was there a big challenge and now that's completely different because of the pandemic?
Yeah, it certainly did change, Randy. I think, I've kind of been centrally focused on developing the Office of the Chief Data Officer program. Our executive director sat on the Governor Abbott's coronavirus task force. And through the discussions and a lot of things, I mean, it's unprecedented. And that word is used a lot, I know, to describe the last year and what we're going through even today. But it was the volume of data, the information flow that came in that presented a number of challenges, particularly around timing and accuracy and all kinds of things. But I was asked through my executive director to actually sit with the area, with the Department of State Health Services, with the Department of Emergency Management, with the Health and Human Services in the State Operations Center, where I actually was there with the epidemiologist for about 2 months, kind of trying to understand the challenges and helping them see through maybe some opportunities to solve some of those challenges. I still today am running a weekly meeting. We do have still daily talks, but it's a data tiger team. It involves representatives from the agencies, the health agencies, from our team, from the DIR team, and also from our vendor partner. And we've actually took, and it's a monumental amount of work, things that were supposed to be updated and upgraded for maybe 2 years or over a 2-year time period had to be updated within 30 days or less.
Need it now.
Now, it had to be now. And
right.
The instantaneous need for information at the governor's office level and provider level and throughout the state was it was incredible. So we had to accelerate every single thing we did, every single thing, whether it be an upgrade, a system replacement, migration to the cloud, everything. And we're still doing that in some cases, but the urgency back in the beginning about collecting positive and negative data and reporting that appropriately. And then obviously we moved to now the administration of shots in the arm, right? And then of course the integration of Tiberius, which is the Operation Warp Speed shipping and delivery system that's come together. So we're bringing data sources together now through our analytics platform and visualization dashboards to try to have and provide leadership with the guidance around every single parameter that we measure and that we have. But it's the acceleration. And just lastly, I'll say it's the dedication and people were working 12, 15-hour days, sometimes for 4, 5, 6 months in a row. Saturdays, Sundays, holidays were not a thing. And I think the dedication of the public servant, right, to make sure that we be able to handle the volume, address the needs, report correctly. I was extremely impressed. I've always been impressed in working in public sector because it's a passion and people, they have a servant's heart in what they do around what they're challenged with. So.
Okay, and how about Laila? What do you see as your biggest challenge, and how did that shift?
Yeah, first I want to echo Ed's wonderful point about especially servant leadership during times of crises. At this point,
yep.
It's all hands on deck. It doesn't matter what agency you work for, whatever you need, people are just willing and able. You forget all of, your rules around, I work in this department, I have this title, and you're just willing to roll up your sleeves and do what's necessary. So I do want to say that I think similarly at the city level for us in Dallas, we experience the urgent need for the timeliness of data, the accessibility of the data, and then of course, building out those partnerships, which became so critical with the county and the state in terms of accessing the data and making it available to all of the critical departments who are part of our first response team. I think actually I would say that the dashboard we built, because I think we had our first case in about mid-March, and within 2 days we had a dashboard up, because I knew instantaneously that that is going to be something that city departments would need access to, that the public would be reaching out and asking our media and public relations department about. And so we wanted to streamline it and make the facts available as easily as possible and being as transparent as possible that we could be. So for us, just the overwhelming amount of data, I think originally we didn't know how large this pandemic would become. And so we designed and built out a data product one way. And then as this pandemic continued to stay with us for many months, we realized that the burden of updating that dashboard and automating it was becoming a bit too much compared to other things that we had on our plate. So we had to rebuild it and update it and tweak it multiple times over as we began to collect even more streams of data. And we continue to do that now as we move into the vaccination phase. And so for us, it was about being more nimble and flexible. And those are not words you necessarily would associate with government, being timeliness and responsive and transparent, maybe also not adjectives that you hear in government, but the effect of having all of these public servants united around this common objective of defeating and addressing this public health pandemic has just been, I think, an incredible thing to watch as a public servant. Ed and I both came from other sectors. We know what it's like to work in for-profit environments. And I do think there is something special about, one, choosing to work in the public sector when you've been in other places, but two, even seeing the heart and the passion of people who have spent their entire careers working in government and how they really step up. So I think that it's just been wonderful to see that. And lastly, I'll just mention that a lot of times people come to the city, as city of Dallas, like we originate all of the data we create it. And in a public health crisis, we rely on the county. And I think this is true across the state. We rely on all county public health authorities to administer data, to collect the data, who have all of the patient information, et cetera. And then we wait for them to give us, kind of de-identified or de-anonymized data that we can just share out. So there has to be this, I think, added partnership moving forward, not only in times of crisis, but in normal times when there are programs that either stem from the state or require the city to report back up, either through the county, the state, or even the federal government. And it's made it that much more important for me to realize that these partnerships need to be even closer than they have been for the multiple levels of government who are all trying to do things to better the quality of life for residents, again, in times of pandemic or in times of just normalcy for us.
Yeah, so you're dependent on them to provide the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that delay is kind of the information that we can get out because we're waiting essentially for them. And if there's no automation path, and we talk about data management, that adds, a bit of a workload for us, but we're extremely grateful. And we know, just like the city is overwhelmed and responding as quickly as we can, we know the county and the state is doing the same.
So I want to shift to the open data portals, and both of you have open data portals. And I think Ed, sort of to build on your acceleration and how things have accelerated because of the pandemic, I think it probably has also accelerated the demand for data transparency and the demand for data from external, I guess, users, consumers of your data. How is your open data portal doing? And how have you seen that kind of increase in demand?
Well, the portal, since we took it over in 2017, we've had it since 2014, but it was in another area for the first 3 years of its life. It came into our program, the Open Data Portal, under the Office of the Chief Data Officer. And we do a very proactive marketing approach with our customers. We go out and do a formal briefing with them, talk to them about value and opportunities, talking about the Open Data Portal, basically governance program that needs to be established. We've developed an Open Data Portal resource guide that covers lots of different information to our customers and our prospective customers about how to get started. In our last reporting, I think we were at over 525 data assets, and that represented 10 customers. But we have 10 in the pipeline right now that we're working them directly. Most recently, the Texas Department of Transportation signed up with us. as well as the Department of Insurance. So we're starting to see more and more agencies show interest in leveraging the portal as the centralized location. I mentioned legislative language. In the upcoming proposed bill that was offered, there's a statement in there that says that the open data portal, the Texas open data portal, shall be considered and utilized by state agencies, and that all state agencies need to submit a minimum of 3 data sets containing high value information. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so again, if that gets passed, what's going to happen is we're going to start to see a huge amount of information going forward. I think, you know, the thing about the portal, you know, it's one thing to post the information, but we have designed an agency executive dashboard specific to the assets that they publish. And we did our first one with the Department of Agriculture, focusing on just their assets and associating a formula to what the opportunity cost savings are for the reduction of public information requests, as well as some other important performance data associated with that. So we want to make this portal continue to grow. I think we're up closer to 60,000 plus visits to those data sets that I mentioned earlier, and also somewhere around 25 or 28,000 downloads of the data. And we consider a download a potential public information request that did not have to follow the standard process of submitting to the agency and then working through the normal the steps to get that back out to the consumer. If the consumer is awake at 3 in the morning and he or she wants to go out to the portal to find some data that they need for a research paper, it's available. So, you know, I think we're going to see and continue to see the importance of government transparency, and we're going to continue to highlight what the Texas Open Data Portal can bring to the agencies for efficiency and bring to their constituents for, you know, basically flexibility.
And I think that's important for this audience, right? The open data portal's been around for years, certainly way before the pandemic. That's not even primarily the data that's out there. It's a whole bunch of different data sets from agents, the wide variety of agencies.
Yeah, and just to add on, you know, some of the main data sets that get all the traction are the ones that DIR presents. So we have our cooperative contracts out there that have been contract with the agencies since 2010 to present. So you can actually see the history of purchases made by individual agencies or customers of DIR on particular products. And you can filter, and that is like 6 million rows of information there, but you can quickly get to a subset of that if you're interested in like all staffing contracts or all contracts that provided services around or hardware purchases or something of that nature. But so it's a great tool, and I've heard this from our vendor partners that they use also for making sure where they are in the marketplace and how sales are going with their product as well as their competitors' products. So,
how about you, Laila? I know, how is your open data portal growing and fitting your need for data transparency?
Yeah, I appreciated Ed's comments on the open data portal, and I think he, you know, hit the nail on the head in terms of, you know, thinking about open data in terms of transparency, in terms of the reduction of staff time, the number of, you know, FOIA requests you receive. That all, it has significant costs because we can have our employees spend that time on other tasks, which is very valuable. And I think there is trust that's built between, you know, communities and governments when you proactively put out data into the world, whether you are just looking at what's happening relative to your neighborhood or looking at the performance of different programs. I think there is certainly an importance to open data that isn't going away anytime soon. We're in the process of actually crafting and overhauling our open data portal in the city. And I think one of the things that I noticed in, you know, doing just a really quick search of open data portals across the country is that We don't necessarily want to post data sets just to post them. I think we're looking at quality over quantity, because I think there's some cities that say we've posted 1,000, we posted 2,000 data sets. Okay, great, but are they relevant? Are they the important factors and the important data sets we need to get out relative to the requests we get from our media department, again, from the FOIA requests that Ed mentioned before. And so it's equally important to think about the organization of the portal as well. So Ed mentioned some really great points on how you could filter by different departments if you have an interest area in one area or another. I think the other thing that I've noticed, at least in just taking a cursory look at ours, is sometimes when we are in a rush to present the data, sometimes we use column headers that are abbreviations well known internally, but as you know, government works in acronyms, and some of those creep into our open data portal from time to time. And so an average person may not understand the government lingo that someone internal who's analyzing a data set might use. And so we want to make sure that the data sets we put out there are useful for not only internal accessibility for analysis, but also for members of the public who may not be as familiar with the titles and the column names. So making sure that, you know, we have a good legend key, if it's necessary, the metadata, et cetera, and making sure it's, again, understood very easily by members of the public. So it's a journey. I think there are always new tools that are coming out in working with our partners to see what is the latest and greatest way of showcasing the data in the simplest format possible. But I do think, you know, step one is having that open data portal, having some reactions to it, and understanding the user experience by talking to kind of our power users and seeing some improvements they'd like to make. Sometimes what we imagine to be a perfect open data solution internally from a system standpoint of view isn't the most useful from a user standpoint.
And that brings up, you know, you both work for the public sector, but, you know, Laila, how much of your time and effort and resources are spent on supporting the city of Dallas and your internal group that knows all those acronyms and, you know, knows these data sets versus making the data available through the portal or through APIs or through whatever to external private sector, through partners and vendors and customers, into the public?
So I will say the way that the function is set up, so again, we're in its infancy. When I came into the organization, I think this is, well, I think this is in a transition cycle now, I'd say that, but there was already an open data portal established. We have a great partner who I'm familiar with from other cities. And I wouldn't necessarily say that I could say maybe even 50% of my time was spent on data as a whole, pre the establishment of this data office. But to split it out for open data portal, you know, step one to me would be, let's look at the inventory of what we have, how much of it is posted online, how much of it we continually need to collect and perhaps improve upon. And so we're looking at factors like that in terms of an overall assessment on what's posted to the open data portal, rather than kind of looking at delineations on time at this point, because we want to make sure that if we're going to do an overhaul, we want to make it something that's really going to be set up for the long term, and something that's going to, again, be as useful as possible to as many people and as many stakeholders as possible.
And you, Ed, I guess your team is now 2. How much of your time do you see really focused on supporting the needs of the agencies and the departments of the state versus making that data available and accessible and usable by outside partners?
Yeah, you know, I see it as really as one. It's 100% of my job to do both. I mean, I can't delineate that, because some days there is a large focus specifically on the open data side because that's what the need is. And other times it's working with an agency on helping them to understand the framework that we put forth on the data management program. So it's very hard to answer that question, Randy, overall. You know, I think just, and then we might be running out a little bit of a time here, but Laila's quote about interacting with you know, citizens is really valuable. That user-centric design to get the most value, particularly around the open data portal. You know, Laila's comment about, you know, waiting for quality, not quantity. I think that's what we drive at from our open data, you know, advice to our customers, and making sure they understand that putting forth the best information and having the best metadata, having the best context around that in English language, not in what the agency uses for terminology, but a general person looking for information can be easily find it and make it accessible to what they're looking for. So.
All right, so I got two more questions here, and then we'll wrap it up. I've got one question here, Ed, specifically for you, to see if you were aware of and could spend a minute just talking about the AI Center of Excellence and how it relates to your team and I guess the data management.
Yeah, so the AI Center of Excellence is something that my colleague, John Hoffman, the Chief Technology Officer at DIR, and his team is actually starting up, is effectively developing that right now as we speak, is to be able to offer up expertise around AI, around what is needed, what are some of those pieces that are important to consider. Of course, we work with our vendor partners around this area because it's all relatively new. We had a cloud center of excellence that came out of the Chief Technology Office as well. But these are things that we want to offer up to our customers, our agencies in higher ed, so that they can, don't go down the pathway alone, that we are there, again, partnered with them to provide that. I don't have a whole lot of detail on that. There's a gentleman named Krishna Ethanol that is basically starting that up. He and I have a meeting this week to talk about how our team is going to interact with his team around the AI Center of Excellence.
Okay, and then to wrap up, I was going to ask each of you, I mean, I'm imagining, I am projecting that a majority of the audience here today is the private sector, and there's some people here from the public sector, but may or may not have ever used public sector data before, whether that's tapping it into combining it with their own data or using it for business purposes. Where would you suggest somebody from the from the private sector get started in trying to find, is there data that they could tap into and make use of and maybe partner with one of your two organizations?
I'll just answer briefly. I mean, I think that every single agency who is not a participant in the open data portal has their own access of data on their website. But in our central location, we have important data that's leveraged every day. The comptroller's office has data sets around sales tax receipts and other things, and those are very highly sought after pieces of information that are leveraged within the private sector group. I think that if there's something that is missing that you're looking for, obviously there's public information requests, the FOIA requests, to be able to access that pieces of information. But as we get legislature passed that helps us continue to mature the program, they will have one-stop shop, at least at the state level, for them to be able to access information that might be helpful.
Yeah,
Laila?
just to back off of Ed's comments, I think the one-stop shop concept is exactly what we aim for with the open data portal. And so if there are data sets that the private sector or really anyone wants to see, we certainly would take that into consideration. There's mechanisms in which you can email and submit requests for I'd love to see fill in the blank data set. And you can begin the work of working with the department to see if that's a viable data set that we could get posted on a regular basis to the portal. What I found, and I'm kind of reversing the question here, is that oftentimes, the city needs data from other places as well. So we go and look at, economic data predictions. We go to the Census Bureau, we'll go to the state. And so we're often trying to combine our own programmatic data that we're collecting with greater macro data that will enable us to predict things out for the future. So the great example that Ed gave in terms of sales receipts, so we want to see when and how will we see a bounce back in our business activity here locally, because that impacts our ability to predict, budgets and programming for not only next year, but, perhaps a couple of years out. And so again, the power is not necessarily in the data set itself, but for me, I've always seen great potential in the combination of data sets from various sectors, from various levels of government, from secondary research even, and that enables us to put together a much more powerful, comprehensive strategy around future programming, but also elevating data-driven decision-making within city government, which is, I think a goal that Ed and I both share.
All right. Well, then we'll wrap it up there. I want to thank both of you so much. I know you are small teams and your time is extremely valuable. So we really appreciate you spending your time with us today and your insights. I'm going to drop as soon as we finish here. I'm going to put the links to both open data portals in the chat. But if you guys have any other links or anything else you want to add, you're welcome to drop those into the chat window as well. And with that, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, and we'll pass it back to Paul, and I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Laila. It was indeed an outstanding presentation, well worth everything. It was great. So we're going to move directly into the last phase of our expo today, and that is the breakout rooms